I think it's time to update my personal editing rig. How long has it been? Now I do incremental updates. Of course, those aren't worthy of videos because I'm either just swapping a CPU out or swapping a graphics card out. My editing rig right now, by the way, if you're wondering, 10900K Core i9 from Intel and an RTX 2080. That's it, right? I mean, it's a good system, but it's not like, it's not super flamboyant. Like I don't have like a 32 or 64 core Threadripper in there. Like I don't go over the top just because I can. I have a few of those chips laying around. There's just no point. Same with the graphics card here. So 2080 Super, I mean, this is like a very marginal upgrade over my current 2080. That's because I don't need any more graphical horsepower than I already have. CUDA acceleration is already great in Premiere Pro as it is with this card. And there's no sense in me just like throwing a 3080 into the system when at the end of the day, this will do just fine. Now, on the CPU side of things though, we're going balls to the wall. Ryzen 9 5950X, 16 cores. Yes, I'm finally making the jump on my personal editing rig from Intel with the IGP, which does help in hardware accelerated rendering, to full-fledged 16 cores, Zen 3 architecture, insane IPC. I really think that this now is the better buy. Now, obviously, if you're talking about budgets and you can get a Core i9 10900K for $500 or so dollars, maybe a 9900K, they've had really good deals as of late on those. Those have IGPs in them. Those might be better than the equivalent $300 or $400 offerings from AMD because those AMD chips lack the IGP. But under $1,000, this is gonna be one of the best video editing CPUs out there, and I'm gonna show you why at the end of the video. But it's time to build. I'm gonna walk through the parts right after this.
NZXT's BLD service offers custom-built gaming PCs at competitive prices in all shapes, sizes, and performance levels. Choose between pre-configured systems like the Starter PC series, or build your own by selecting your favorite games and ideal resolution. BLD is also offering systems with ampier graphics cards for among the best value gaming experience in a system you won't need to lift a finger to build, and best of all, you'll only pay a $99 build fee. Learn more about NZXT's BLD service by clicking the sponsor link below.
So we've already mentioned the CPU and the graphics card. Up next is the motherboard. You're wondering why the heck I'm going with a B550 board when we're talking about a 16 core 32 thread CPU in the Zen 3 lineup. What on earth? What are you doing, Greg? Well, B550 for one, it's more than enough. People think that B550 is just like overall inferior chipset. Don't consider it at all for anything that's, 12 cores or up. Look, B550 is fine. This particular board is an insane power delivery setup. I hate the chipset fans and X570 boards. I don't like tweaking them in the BIOS, just a pain in the butt. Yeah, I've checked the specs on this thing. I've tested this board many times in other videos. It has all the features I want. It's good enough. Power supply from Fractal Design, 860 watt is more than enough. This is a platinum rated power supply, so it's gonna be very efficient, fairly quiet under load as well. 800 watts or above I think is ideal for the system. To cool the CPU, you've got a Pure Loop 240mm AIO. I think 240mm is gonna be enough for this. I'm not gonna overclock the 5950X. I typically don't overclock my CPUs. It's just not worth it. The extra benefit you get out of overclocking in terms of performance is kind of overshadowed by the fact that the CPU runs way hotter as a result, typically, unless you have a very well-binned chip. So I think this is gonna do the trick just fine. And then sticking with the Be Quiet theme, I've gone with a 500DX, and this is one of those like cases where, like, if you love the Fractal Design, like Meshify C, I mean, this case is right up your alley. It's gonna cost around the same. It looks freaking sexy. I love this clear tempered glass on a black case. Gonna look super good. And look at that, 140mm fan support at the rear and a freaking compact mid tower. Now with this kit of RAM here, you're probably thinking, Greg, how on earth are you gonna fit 8 DIMMs into a 4-slot motherboard? That's impossible. We're gonna take 4 of these out. It's gonna be 32 gigs in total, 3200 megahertz. It's not the fastest, not necessarily ideal for Zen 3 especially, but we've got really tight timings here. I mean, this is Corsair Dom Platts. I mean, what more can I say? These speak for themselves. And last, we've got a Viper VP4100 1TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD. This thing is gonna be freaking fast, lightning fast thanks to those Gen 4 speeds, up to 5,000 megabytes per second reads, up to 4,400 megabytes per second writes, and you get a sleek looking little heatsink there. This thing is actually not very expensive. I thought it would be more expensive than it was. Gen 4 drives are actually okay deals considering. Usually Gen 3 drives are gonna be fast enough, but if you really want maximum potential in your storage, then you gotta get a Gen 4 drive. Make sure you've got a compatible chipset and CPU though. And now that that's all out of the way, I'm gonna show you a build montage. Prepare yourselves. And 2 days later, I know this took a while, I've been doing quite a bit on the side. We are ready to install the final part. In this case, it will be an Elgato 4K 60 Pro capture card, one of the best capture cards on the market. Of course, you get that 4K 60 FPS action, good for 4K gameplay. If you have a 4K camera, you can just do 4K streaming directly, which is nice. That's it. This is the system. Looks a tad bit weird with the AIO cables hanging as far down as they do. I like that these tubes are a bit longer just because sometimes you don't have a lot of versatility when it comes to how you orient the water block, but it works. It looks good. In my opinion, I think it's a very clean build. I like the subtle red in these cables. These are from nsource.net, by the way. And we've even got some red accents up here in these Noctua fans that I didn't show you guys, but I figured it needed a bit more red to kind of round out the color scheme. What do you think? So it's been a few days. Again, other projects have come up, so this is actually like more like a 5 or 6 day video, even though it hasn't really consumed that much of my time. I just installed the operating system. I got a few programs on there, including 3D Mark Time Spy. I wanted to test run that benchmark at least to see kind of where the system stacks up. I'm curious because like the graphics card now is, well, it's a generation old. Like a 2080 Super is really not all that super anymore, especially when seen in context of like an RTX 3070, which is a cheaper card than the 2080 Super was, and that's an objectively better card, more in line with like a 2080 Ti. Anyway, the score in Time Spy was 12,524 with a CPU score of 13,861, graphics score of 11,192. Without a doubt, the graphics card is what's holding us back in this system. If I had replaced this with like a 3080, this would have placed, you know, within like the 98th, 99th percentile, I imagine. Right now, though, we're only better than 91% of all results, so you can run this test on your own system and kind of see where you stack up. Another thing I wanted to test, reads and writes for the Gen 4 VP4100 NVMe drive. I wanted to see how close the manufacturer was to the actual values with just a 1 gigabyte push here. So right at 5 gigabytes, yes, gigabytes, there's like, anyway. 5 gigabytes per second, thereabouts, so about 5,000 megabytes per second, and then writes were about 40 to 50 megabytes per second. That's Gen 4 for you folks. It's just lightning fast. Now the last thing I wanted to test, and this is perhaps the most important of them all, was Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro render times more specifically. That's what kind of just consumes a large chunk of my workflow that I wish didn't. Now, obviously I could do other things in the meantime while things are exporting, but I don't like to, you know, get up from my seat once I'm already sitting down. I know it's like a first world problem. Anyway, I'm just trying to look for the fastest export times, not necessarily worried about value per se. My 10900K system with the IGP rendered a 3-minute, an exactly 3-minute long 4K 24 FPS 908 megabyte file in the YouTube 4K preset. And I think 55 seconds. 55 seconds, okay? That's really fast. That's like for every 3 minutes of footage, 1 minute of render time. That's phenomenal, actually. But again, the IGP plays a big role. One of the reasons why the i9 does so well, particularly the non-F SKU, because the F SKUs don't have the IGP. That's why they're a bit cheaper. The 5950X rendered the exact same file in the exact same encoding preset in 50 seconds. So you're thinking, wow, Greg, that's like a 5-second delta. Are you seriously making a big whoop of that? Okay, it's 5 seconds for a 3-minute clip. If I'm rendering a 12, 15-minute clip, I mean, that's a 10% reduction in overall render times. In my opinion, that's a win. I'll take it. The 240mm AIO seems to be holding up just fine. I've tweaked the fan curves just a bit in the BIOS. I set up a RAID 0 config for those 2 Samsung 860 Evo drives that you saw earlier in the B-roll. It took a while, actually. I was trying to configure it in the BIOS, just would not stick. The operating system wouldn't see the RAID array, so I ended up just doing it in the disk manager, and that was like super simple. You know, I just had to wait for the volume to be created, and I've already got tons of Steam games loaded on there. Lightning fast, much faster, usually about twice as fast or thereabouts than a typical SSD, a SATA SSD. So around 1,000 megabytes or so reads and writes, because it's a striped array. So half of the data more or less is being written on one drive, the other half is being written on the other, and you can more or less split both of those data streams up so that you can write and read twice as fast. That's like a super dumbed down version of what a RAID 0 is. But anyway, you get the point. It's just a faster overall setup. It is riskier, but it's just my Steam library. So, I mean, who really cares at the end of the day? Most of my stuff is saved to the Steam cloud regardless. But I'm happy with the system. I synced up the LEDs. I like the little rain effect here on the Corsair Dom Platts. slots. I've also got the little sliding red LED up top. This is the built-in LED strip in the 500DX from Be Quiet. Also, the sliding red LED up front in the case as well. I think I'm just gonna leave the 2080 logo white. I don't even know if I can change it, but it doesn't really matter. I like not having it totally red in there, and the white kind of shines on the PCIe Express cables, or PCI Express cables, so it looks pretty good. Anyway, if you guys like this video, you can let me know by giving a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. Let me know what you're sporting currently and how your system stacks up against mine in something like 3D Mark Time Spy. So you've got my results here, and I wanna see how well you do. And look, this is one of those things where it's like, for what I'm doing right now, even in Premiere Pro, a 5950X is kind of overkill. Honestly, the better value in Premiere Pro specifically, we have a video talking about this, is gonna be the Intel chips with the IGPs, just because you can leverage the IGP in tandem with CUDA acceleration and the raw CPU cores. This is just like an all-around workaholic chip. I can stream, I can multitask like a boss with this chip. Not that I couldn't already with a 10900K, I just have that much more headroom at my disposal. Having that 4K 60 capture card there, I mean, that opens up a world of possibilities. All these parts, by the way, have been linked below, along with a few parts from my previous rig. I'll be sure to discern between the two. And yeah, so if you want to build something similar to this in the future, especially when that 5950X gets in stock, occasionally Newegg throws them in stock. Amazon's a little more sketchy late, but you know, they'll show up soon. You can buy those and build something similar to this. I'll catch you guys on the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for building with me.